Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Joan Farini-Mundy, the president of the University of Maine and our regional campus, the University of Maine at Machias. And I'm delighted to welcome Chancellor Dannel Malloy to our campus today as part of his Keep It Up tour, taking a look at every campus, talking to students, visiting classes, visiting with all of you virtually to get your questions, to hear your questions and thoughts and ideas about how we're doing, and to check in with all of us. So with this, I'll turn to Chancellor Malloy, and I encourage you to send in your questions and we'll convey them and get them answered as we go along. So Chancellor, any opening remarks?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the introduction and the opportunity to visit with a broader audience of people this way. I guess we're all getting used to Zoom conferences and questioning sessions. But I want to start by saying thank you to every member of the staff, every member of the faculty, every student on this campus for the extraordinary job that's been done to allow us to open to in-classroom learning experiences and to invite people from out of state and other portions of our state to this campus and other campuses across the system. It really is quite extraordinary to be in a situation that we've done about 28,000 COVID tests since August. I think on campus, we've identified around 28 cases. We know that another 20 or so cases were identified, not through our testing, but because people reported themselves elsewhere were symptomatic. Our rate of infection, as best we can calculate, is about 0.1% on our testing base on an ongoing basis. Put it in perspective, Maine right now is a full 1%. If anyone had told me some number of months ago that on a campus setting we could be beating a statewide average, I would not have thought that that's possible. Now, I may be tempting fate. We do want to get to Thanksgiving and then allow for the conclusion of classes and testing online. But thank you for everything you've done. I should also say to our faculty members, I know the tremendous strain that you're under with respect to teaching in multiple modalities and circumstances that, quite frankly, none of us ever thought we would have to deal with for so long. So thank you for that. A couple of other quick things, and I'm happy to talk about whatever is on people's minds. We do continue to do our work on unified accreditation with the hope that that is a new tool in our toolbox that will allow us to address future challenges as well as the current ones we have. Look forward to a robust multi-campus programming in the future, made possible through our accreditor recognizing us as a unified accredited institution. And then, of course, touch upon and happy to answer questions on any subject, as I keep saying, but also understanding that the Alfond commitment to the University of Maine system and to the University of Maine in particular are really quite extraordinary. And what I would look at as nothing short of a solid endorsement of the work that we're doing on at all of our universities, on our campuses, and here at the flagship most particularly. By the way, you notice I just used the term flagship. I'm fully aware of the status of this institution as our primary research institution. I'm fully aware of the various statuses that attach to this institution, and quite frankly, oh so happy that it is a shining star in our constellation of universities.
Thank you so much, Chancellor, and we are very grateful for your support and your interest. The fact that you keep an office on this campus and that we get to see you is wonderful. And it's an exciting time, even though the challenges of this pandemic are substantial. I'm just so pleased to be a part of the University of Maine community to see how well they have risen to the occasion across the campus in all of our areas and across the state where our facilities exist as well. I also want to take a moment to introduce Provost John Ballen, who is here with us as well. I'm not sure that all of you have yet had the chance to meet him. Provost Ballen joined us this summer. And John, do you have a word or two you'd like to say?
Well, so thank you for that, Joan. I'm really happy to be here and joining you all in this virtual tour. And I'm really glad the Chancellor is taking the time. So I'm going to turn it back over, because I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions for the Chancellor. So thank you.
Great. So the questions are starting to come in. Um, and I wanted to just raise a couple of them for the Chancellor. And there are a few that have to do with getting started again. What's going to happen when we come back in the spring? Um, how will we be opening up? Will there be more classroom spaces to deliver in-person instruction in the spring? Will the spring schedule look like this? Chancellor, if you could give your thoughts, knowing that everything is still quite unpredictable, but your perspective about how you would like to see the spring happen ideally.
Sure. Based on the lessons that we've learned, everything can change literally overnight. We're well aware of that, but we are anticipating a startup in January, not unlike the startup we began in August. Obviously, you're aware that we have moved the start of classes by 1 week, moved it back. We took a week. We're starting later than we had originally scheduled, and we've eliminated a spring break. I know that causes consternation, but the idea that we'd be in a situation next spring, the likes of which we were in this last March, when we knew that we'd be sending folks out to visit places that they were more likely to come in contact with the virus than they were if they stayed in Maine or stayed on the campus, is too chilling an event to consider. And so those sacrifices have been committed to. On a testing protocol basis, we will finalize that and what days will start, but not unlike what we've experienced this semester. We've already budgeted for that on a system-wide basis so that we can sustain those testing protocols and be in a position to amplify that testing when circumstances in a different part or a different university within our constellation requires that. I do hope that we'll have more possibilities of in-classroom experiences, particularly for our then will be second semester and in some cases first semester freshmen, because we know some number of the 200 plus students who deferred starting this last September will want to start in January. So you know, I hope we can have a robust offering of those opportunities as possible. We'll continue the process right after students leave before Thanksgiving. Right after Thanksgiving, we will begin upgrading additional classrooms at our universities across the university spectrum. We did set money aside. We have some additional money to spend in finalizing that modernization effort. I think that touches the main points of the question, but there may be others that I've missed. I'm not ducking them, I can assure you.
So I'll just give a little more detail into the question and add my own thoughts to it as well, which have to do with whether it would be possible to convert some of our large campus gathering spaces that have available PA systems, like some of the rooms in the Wells Conference Center, into rooms for seminars in which students could sit at appropriate distance and be able to see and hear each other using these good sound systems. So I'd look to the Chancellor first for a general response, and then perhaps to the Provost, who can speak more specifically about how we're working to make sure that the rooms and classroom spaces in next semester are adequate for everybody.
Well, throughout the pandemic, I have made it rule one that we will comply with civil authority. So we can do lots of things as long as it's compliant with the directives coming out of the Maine CDC or the governor's directives. So lots of things are possible. Whether they're practical, I'll have to leave that to decision-making on at our university level. I sit on this campus. I have an office here. I have an office down at Augusta. I have an office in Portland. But those kinds of decisions will be made by the individual universities. I hope we can do whatever we can to increase in-classroom experiences for our students. At the same time, we're keeping folks in as safe a position as we might reasonably be able to.
John, more to add on that. Thank you, Chancellor.
Yeah, and just to add on, the Chancellor's right. We are actually adding more in-person classes this coming spring semester than we have currently. As many of you know, over 70% of our students are having some component of their classroom right now experience face-to-face. And we are looking at all different spaces that we can utilize for classrooms to optimize across the campus. And we continue to try to add technology where needed.
Great, thanks, John. Chancellor, there's a question about student financial aid. What plans are there for providing more financial assistance to the student body who are almost universally experiencing difficulties due to COVID-19 mitigation efforts?
You know, in general terms, we're understanding of those situations. You may not be aware, but last year we did change our policies with respect to continuation of students from if we had a situation where if you owed as few as $50, you could be prevented from participating in the educative process. We changed that across campuses. With respect to an infusion of additional dollars for financial aid, there may be some minor adjustments. I hope there'll be positive adjustments, but there is no pot of money for us to break into to do that. The reality is our costs associated with COVID, if you include the delay in research or the expenditure of research dollars, is approaching $80 million on a system-wide basis. Testing alone will cost us somewhere between $12 and $14 million for the 2 semesters. So this has never been a rich system, and in some senses, because of the difficulties we're experiencing, it's a slightly poorer system. Having said that, we were the first university in New England to return dollars to students from the refunds. We were the first institution in New England to distribute CARES dollars when those monies became available. We are acutely aware of how many first-generation students and how many of our students are living with financial difficulties, and we will respond to the best of our ability accordingly. Having said that, there is no additional money yet to be devoted to that, except some of our universities, this being one, was quite successful in raising some number of dollars from alumni and others to support efforts to hold people or to make sure that they were in good shape financially.
Right, and I just wanted to amplify that and say thank you to all of those donors and contributors who helped us with our Student Crisis Fund, and we may need to be back with you on that in the spring. We've also been very conscious of the needs of our international students and the importance of making sure that there is adequate support for them, and we've done our best in that area as well. But I realize that the needs change. So
if I can, Joan, on the international side, you know, we're proud of our efforts to protect our international students, to make sure that they're secure, to make sure that they had food, to make sure they had a roof over their heads if they couldn't return, or they feared returning to their home country and not being able to get back. So I'm actually very proud of the efforts, particularly in that area. And then, quite frankly, standing up for what I believe is a good standing up for good policies with respect to inviting students to our country and to Maine to further their education.
Great. There was a question about the spring semester, and I think we may have implied our answer, but just to be clear, it says, I'm wondering if it was true that the next semester we will be doing in-person classes at UMaine. Well, we're doing them now. We're hoping to do more of them in the spring semester. And again, we'll stay flexible, but our faculty really have stepped up, have come to understand the complexities of teaching in a hybrid mode, plus a face-to-face piece of that, plus the online versions. And so constant improvement there. And we do expect, I believe the provost may have some statistics on this soon, do expect to be able to offer more in-class face-to-face courses come spring semester. I don't know if we're ready with that yet, John. Soon.
Well, yeah, I don't have the percentages right now, but we are, students are starting to register for spring, and the modalities have been registered for the classes. There was an earlier question to the Chancellor when he was visiting one of the classrooms, and they asked about, you know, will there be modality changes? There were a lot of modality changes at the beginning of this semester. We're trying to not do that unless, of course, there's a really good reason for that, you know, health considerations and other such examples. But for the most part, what you're seeing as you register, hopefully will be what you'll see coming in the spring semester. We're having slight changes here or there, one or two, and they're actually going both ways. Sometimes they're requesting to go to a more remote modality, and others to just had one an hour ago asking to go face-to-face. So there are slight changes, but for the most part, we're trying not to have those happen right now.
I see that Vice President and Chief of Staff Kimberly Whitehead is here as well. Kimberly, would you like to make any comments? You're on mute.
Mute.
My apologies, I'm trying to manage. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm just really happy to be here. Thank you, President Farini Mundy, for the opportunity to greet everyone. Just want to thank everyone for keeping us safe and adhering to the guidelines this semester. We're so excited that you are here with us, and we look forward to your return for the spring semester. Please keep those questions coming. I posted in the chat. You can send your questions to you can email them to umaine.alerts@maine.edu, or you can post them in the chat. Thanks so much.
There are a couple of questions that are also programmatic about what we offer and what we'll be offering and so forth. And I think, Chancellor, one of them is going to be quite tied to the ALFund, but I'll start with the first one, which is, I would like to ask about the decision to cut arts programming at UMaine Machias, and I'll answer that in a second. But then the person goes on to say, I'm concerned about the narrow focus on science and engineering and the lack of support for the humanities across the University of Maine system, and would like that issue to be addressed. So we'll turn to the Chancellor for some thoughts on that. And particularly given his own background, I'm sure he's got ideas about where we should be with the humanities and the social sciences. But back to Machias and the arts, I want to be very clear that the Machias campus has not had a music program. They have had an interdisciplinary fine arts bachelor's degree that was restructured, because it was under enrolled. It was restructured as creative arts, and it has a music concentration that was cut in the process back in 2018-19. So we certainly still have the arts happening at the University of Maine at Machias, but in a different form. Chancellor, what about the humanities and STEM?
Well, actually, let me just go to Fort Kent. I have visited that campus on many occasions, and on every occasion I visit the program. I go to they have a small museum space there. They have a nice collection of art. The most recent show that was there when I was on campus was put together by students themselves, choosing from their collection and what was meaningful to them. And they also designed the descriptions of the artwork as well. So arts are alive and well at Fort Kent as they are, I think, at Machias, sorry. I mixed my trips up. At Machias, and it's not for lack of desire to have these programs, but when you have a program that's not when you have parts of a program that are not attracting students, it's hard to justify an expense in a system which I would be the first to say is not a rich system. And as grateful as we are to the state for its funds, we undoubtedly need more funds. So some decisions are going to have to be made. I think this pandemic situation is causing us to look at those situations and examine them and try to understand the workload as well as what's being accomplished or not accomplished by the presence of any one position.
Thank you. And we aren't turning entirely into a STEM system, right? We're going to continue to, even with the ALFund dollars, be able to expand our student focus into student success and the ability to make sure that all of our programs across the humanities are well supported going forward.
Well, I'll go a step further, if you don't mind, Joan. I think the specific money, which I think totals about $45 million over 12 years to be expended in retention and student success, is intended to be an investment that actually ultimately pays for itself. If we could come back into appropriate peer institution matching rates of retention and graduation, we'd have a lot more donors at the end of the time that they get their degree. Our people are far more likely to support the institution they'd graduate from. We'd have more people staying with us on a semester to semester, year to year basis. Therefore, we'd have more income. Quite frankly, that might actually cause us to have to enlarge programs, something that I'm not against doing. But it has to be done in accordance with what the needs of the state are, what the capabilities of our institutions, and whether programs will go a distance in supporting themselves.
Great, thank you. There's a question coming that we've had repeatedly. It has to do with the uncertainties of the pandemic and whether we can really stay open and what it will mean as things change. So this person has noted, with the rapid increase in positive COVID-19 cases throughout the state recently, increased public gatherings due to the presidential campaigns and the Halloween holiday this weekend, at what point will the school consider closing before Thanksgiving break? And if it does not, will students be penalized if they are uncomfortable going to in-person classes? So I know the chancellor's had this question, but love to hear his thoughts.
Sure, I'll give you my thoughts. When we closed the institution of the system, we closed it in unison. We did it all at the same time because we had a common calendar, which was going to send people back home or distant places where they were more likely to come into contact with the virus, bring the virus back and infect other people. We're in a different situation now. The virus is present in Maine. When we announced our closure, it was not. We set up pretty stringent guidelines with respect to who could come back, how you would come back, what the testing protocols would look like. We required a large amount of housing to be set aside. One of our losses is because we did that. We said that where we had triples, we wouldn't have triples. We limited the numbers of people at different types of housing. And then we set aside a large amount of housing to be space to handle people who have been exposed or may have been exposed and those people who may have the virus. As I started today, we had 98% of the rooms set aside for quarantining available. As I began the day, we had 98% of the space needed to isolate individuals who have the virus. 98% of the space was available. We're in a very different situation than we were the first 2 weeks of last March. Having said that, I am committed that we make the right decision at each one of our universities or at each one of those campuses based on the circumstances that present themselves. We recently had 100,000 cases in a day, although we have had 1,000 active cases in Maine. That's a fraction of what is happening elsewhere in the nation. And that was not new cases, that's total cases. We had 100 in one day, which was unusual. I hope we'll return to a more normal Maine level. Maine and Vermont have been vying for the best behaviors of any of our states. I hope we continue that competition. But if we have to close, it'll be a decision made in consultation with myself by a president of a university concerning how a business should be carried on in that situation. I would be very happy if we can get to Thanksgiving without having to close any of our institutions. I think it would be better for us. I think it would be better for our students. I just was in a classroom about 15 students. Everyone was celebrating the fact that they had the opportunity for in-classroom learning. They didn't have all of their courses that way, although it sounded like one person was able to do that. But they needed that experience. And the number one complaint I got from freshmen in that classroom is that they wish they had a more normal experience. As grateful as they are for the experience they're having, they wish they were having a more normal experience. Hopefully we'll be able to give that to them next semester or next year.
Great, thank you. John, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I thought it was a wonderful answer. We are working daily on this, having these conversations, and we are so far, knock on wood, we're at 0.11%, of cases, and so if we continue doing this, I think we'll easily be able to make it to the Thanksgiving break. I'll knock on wood. on that. And, so hopefully we won't have any changes until then. And then we are all set to go remote after that, for those 8 weeks.
I'd like to point something out to the listeners because people may have different levels of insight into what it is to be a university system with separate and individual universities that comprise it, together with the chancellor and his office and his staff, of course. But from the beginning of this pandemic, really from late January, early February, when the word was beginning to spread and the chancellor and others were paying attention to what was happening around the world, this has been a remarkably interactive and collaborative process with direction and guidance and problem spotting happening at the level of the system at the same time, those same things happening at our individual universities. And I would like to point to the testing process as one of the best examples I can find in these recent months of very iterative, interactive work at the hands of the Scientific Advisory Board, of course, where the advice is coming from. The chancellor and his team have put in place, with a lot of consultation with university-based experts, a massive testing program. It's not the same testing program as Vermont, but we are using randomized testing right now and getting very, very helpful information coming from that, as well as the wastewater testing. And the University of Maine has a large role in all of this because of the breadth and depth of our scientific expertise, as well as our lab capacity. So all of this is it's changing as we go, but the ability for the system and the universities to be interactive has been extraordinary and crucial, really. We have a very specific question about how we are dealing with lab courses that cannot be done virtually. We heard from students in the last session how much they appreciate the opportunity to be together to do hands-on experience. I'll give one example from UMaine, and the chancellor will have a broader answer, I'm sure. But in chemistry, we were actually putting together, the faculty in the chemistry department, putting together kits that they could mail out to students so that they could conduct their labs with the materials that would be needed at distance, although the logistics of that were tricky. You can only put things in the mail that you are allowed to go in the mail. So there had to be some creativity about what could go in those kits, as well as make sure that the materials would be preserved through the mail and so forth. But the Dean of Liberal Arts and Sciences tells me that next semester they will address this differently, that the process of sending out a lot of kits, while perhaps it was helpful, we're going to look instead for how to do more face-to-face in very small sections in the labs. And Chancellor may wish to add, he's seeing all the campuses looking for ways to do this face-to-face work differently.
I think we do the best we can. I think we provide the highest quality product that we can provide in the circumstances we're in. It's not optimal, but I will remind people, we have universities of 100,000 students who are all online, doing all of those kinds of things online, except for practicum. So I just, we're learning things about ourselves that we thought we would never know because we believed them to be impossible and therefore we didn't do them. Now we're doing those things. And I think we're learning more about ourselves on a daily basis and what is possible. Not what's best, because in a pandemic, you can't do what's best, but you can do as good a job as you possibly can and share the information that you've accumulated in your career with the students who want to emulate your career.
Folks in the audience, this is a great chance to submit some more questions. We're slowing down a little bit in the question stream. Provost Ballen, anything further on the lab arrangements, because you're closer to the scheduling?
Well, actually, you summarized it perfectly. I was going to bring up Dean Emily Haddad's comments on Friday about the labs, that they're going to try to get more in-person labs with smaller numbers. That is the focus that's going to be happening in CLAS. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we right now have about 100 more courses face-to-face with face-to-face components in the spring than we do in the fall. So we're definitely really working toward that. And if we can do as the Chancellor had mentioned earlier, and Maine continue to do well when it comes to not spreading the infection, the virus, we hope to be able to do that in the spring then and make it through spring.
Chancellor, we'll turn back to you for any comments that you'd like to make, any additional topics that we haven't brought up that you'd like to be sure we touch on here.
Well, you know, given my prior profession, I could just call up one of the old speeches I used to give and just go into a, you know, political rant. Let me
I
do.
was afraid of that, but that's okay.
No, I did send folks a message about our democracy, and I am quite concerned about the effects that the election may have on individuals and how they may respond to it. I think this is the time to be understanding and reflective, and to recognize this process to the greatest extent as we can. As an extension of our democracy playing itself out in an unusual way, but nonetheless in an appropriate way of an election. In that message, I advocated that all votes be counted because that's what people expect. And it may take a long time for this decision to be certified. I had some experience of that. I alluded to in my communication to you all about politics, but I think we need to, everyone take a deep breath. I trust we are going to get through this process, and I believe ultimately we'll be better for it. Other than that, again, Joan, what I'd say is it has been a pleasure working with you and getting to know your faculty and staff. And quite frankly, I'm better for the experience that you all have given me in my fifth, as I call it, my fifth career. So, but this is important work. We should be proud at how we have responded to this pandemic. I think as a system, I'm not sure anyone in the country is doing better than we are. And as I alluded to before, we responded to our students more rapidly than most institutions. There were institutions opening in September and August that hadn't sent their CARES Act money to their students. We did it within days. This is a responsive institution in that regard, and we need to keep it up.
Thank you so much, Chancellor. It is terrific to have you here, to have you a partner, and to learn from and benefit from your leadership during this extremely challenging time. I also want to do a special thank you to everyone here at the University of Maine, to our faculty, to our staff, to our students, to our stakeholders and loyal supporters, alums, donors, everyone who's in this community, because you have shown a lot of interest. You have followed the Black Bears Care Pact. You have come up with great ideas for how to make this a successful period of time for the University of Maine. And so I'm very personally grateful, even though I don't get to see you all as much. Well, it seems like I get to see you on Zoom sometimes, but really can't wait till you're able to be back in bigger numbers to see the campus again and to enjoy it. It has been just beautiful through the fall, and it's a little gray today, but we do expect it to be beautiful most of the time. So thank you for all that you do, for being a part of the University of Maine, for being Black Bears. We really appreciate it. Thank you again, Chancellor, for taking the time to be with us today. Goodbye, everyone.